thought it was? I thought it was. Did you ever eat it?
A great American who started out many a morning on the American breakfast.
During the 1960s, working families had an incredible secret simmering in their kitchens, 30 remarkable dinners that most people today have completely forgotten. These tough meals helped entire families survive on $5 a week. Let's uncover these forgotten dinners that our parents relied on when payday was still days away. Tuna noodle casserole. Ever made dinner from 3 cans and a prayer? It's 1963 in a small Cleveland kitchen where Mom's counting coins before grocery day. The smell of buttered noodles fills the air while she opens the last can of tuna. With payday still 3 days away, this casserole was pure working-class genius. You'd boil egg noodles until tender, then mix them with canned tuna, cream of mushroom soup, and frozen peas. A layer of crushed potato chips went on top for crunch. 25 minutes in the oven, and suddenly dinner was done. The creamy sauce coated every noodle while the chips turned golden brown. Kids cleaned their plates without complaining. The tuna stretched to feed 6 people. One mom called it her miracle meal because it cost under $1 but filled every belly. Today, restaurants charge $15 for artisan tuna gratin, but this fed a family for pocket change. Just wait until you see what happened when Bologna met macaroni in dish number 2. Bologna and macaroni skillet. Ever fried lunch meat for dinner and made it taste like heaven? It's 1965 and Dad's working double shifts at the factory. The fridge holds Bologna, leftover macaroni, and hope. This skillet dinner turned cheap into cheerful with one simple trick. You'd slice bologna thick and fry it until the edges curled up like little cups. The kitchen smelled smoky and salty. Then cooked macaroni went into the same pan with butter, salt, and pepper. The bologna grease coated every noodle with flavor. Some moms added onions or green peppers if they had them. Others mixed in a can of corn for color. The whole skillet bubbled and browned at the edges. Kids thought it was fancy because the bologna looked like little bowls. Adults knew it was brilliant because it cost 30 cents and used what you had. One dad said it tasted like payday breakfast for supper. The salty meat and buttery noodles made everyone happy. Modern diners call it cured meat pasta and charge $12, but working families knew the real secret. Salmon patties. Ever turned a can of fish into golden treasure? It's 1964 in Detroit, and Mom's stretching groceries until Friday. The can of salmon cost 49 cents, but needed to feed 4 hungry mouths. This recipe was pure kitchen magic. You'd drain the salmon and pick out the bones if you were picky. Most folks left them in for calcium. Mix it with breadcrumbs, beaten egg, chopped onion, and a splash of milk. Form it into patties like hamburgers. The smell of frying salmon filled the whole house. They sizzled in hot oil until golden brown and crispy outside. Inside stayed tender and flaky, served with mashed potatoes and green beans. It felt like a real dinner. Kids never guessed it started from a can. The crispy coating gave way to soft fish that tasted like the ocean came to Ohio. One woman wrote that her family called them poor man's crab cakes and requested them every week. Chicken and dumplings from scratch. Ever made clouds float on top of chicken broth? It's 1962, and Sunday dinner needs to stretch 1 chicken into a feast for 8. The kitchen windows steam up as the pot simmers. Grandma's recipe turned bones and flour into Sunday comfort. You'd simmer a whole chicken until it fell apart, then pick the meat clean. The bones went back in the pot with onions, carrots, and celery. That golden broth was liquid gold. For dumplings, you mixed flour, baking powder, salt, and milk into a sticky dough. Drop spoonfuls right into the bubbling broth. They puffed up like pillows floating on golden soup. The smell was pure home, chicken, herbs, and steam. Each dumpling soaked up broth while staying fluffy inside. 1 bowl filled you completely. The chicken was tender enough to cut with a fork. Kids fought over the biggest dumplings. One mom said it was like eating hugs. The whole pot cost under $2 but fed everyone twice. Hamburger rice. Skillet. Ever made 1 pound of meat feed 6 people? It's 1966 and the grocery budget is tight. Ground beef costs more than it should, but rice is cheap. This skillet dinner was pure mathematics. Stretch the expensive with the affordable. You'd brown hamburger with diced onions until it smelled like Saturday morning. Add uncooked rice, a can of tomato sauce, and water. Cover and simmer until the rice puffed up and absorbed every drop. The meat flavor coated each grain. Green peppers added crunch if you had them. Some families mixed in corn or peas. The whole pan bubbled like a promise. When it was done, every spoonful had meat, rice, and vegetables. Kids scraped their plates clean. The hamburger stretched further than anyone thought possible. One working dad called it cowboy rice because it was hearty enough for ranch hands. The tomato sauce made it taste Italian even though it was pure American thrift. Liver and onions with bacon. Ever made the most hated meat taste like Sunday dinner? It's 1963 and liver costs half what steak does. Every working family knew this secret. Bacon makes everything better. The smell of frying bacon filled the kitchen while kids made faces, but Mom knew what she was doing. You'd fry bacon until crispy, then set it aside. Slice onions thick and cook them in the bacon grease until golden and sweet. The liver got dusted with flour and fried fast, just until brown outside but still pink inside. Overcooked liver turned to shoe leather. Done right, it was tender as butter. The bacon went back on top with the caramelized onions. Served with mashed potatoes, it was a complete meal. The bacon grease tied everything together with smoky flavor. Kids who swore they hated liver cleaned their plates. The onions were sweet enough to balance the mineral taste. One mom said the bacon was like makeup for meat. The whole dinner cost under $1, but packed more iron than a vitamin pill. Today, restaurants serve heritage organ meats for $22, but working families ate them because they were cheap and nutritious. The secret was never apologizing for what you served. Pork chops and sauerkraut. Ever made German comfort food in an American kitchen? It's 1964, and the pork chops are on sale. Thick ones cost more, but thin ones cook fast and feed everyone. This dinner brought old-world flavor to new-world budgets. You'd brown pork chops in a hot skillet until they were golden on both sides. The smell was pure Saturday night. Then came the sauerkraut, straight from the jar, tangy and sharp. It went right on top of the chops with some of its juice. Cover the pan and let it simmer. The sauerkraut mellowed and the pork chops stayed tender. Some families added sliced apples for sweetness. Others threw in a few caraway seeds for authentic flavor. The whole kitchen smelled like a German beer hall. Served with mashed potatoes or boiled potatoes, it was stick-to-your-ribs food. The sauerkraut cut through the richness of the pork. Kids who turned their noses up at vegetables somehow ate this without complaining. Split pea soup with ham bone. Ever made a feast from scraps? It's 1965, and the ham bone from Sunday dinner still has stories to tell. This soup turned yesterday's leftover into tomorrow's comfort. The bone went into a big pot with split peas, water, and thyme. That's all you needed for magic. The peas slowly broke down and thickened the broth while the bone gave up its smoky flavor. Diced carrots, celery, and onions added color and crunch. Some moms threw in a bay leaf or two. The whole house smelled like slow Sunday afternoon. After hours of simmering, you'd fish out the bone and pick off any remaining ham. That meat went back into the pot. The soup was thick enough to stand a spoon in, and golden green like spring. One bowl filled you completely. The smoky ham flavor ran through every spoonful. Kids who wouldn't eat vegetables devoured this soup. One working mom called it liquid money because it cost almost nothing but fed everyone for days. Served with cornbread or crackers, it was a complete meal. The leftover soup got better each day as the flavors deepened. Stuffed cabbage rolls. Ever wrapped dinner in a vegetable? It's 1962, and Mom's making food that tastes like Europe but costs like America. Cabbage heads were cheap and filling. This recipe made them into something special. You'd core a whole cabbage and boil it until the leaves peeled off easily. The kitchen steamed like a laundry. For filling, mix ground beef with cooked rice, diced onions, salt, and pepper. Some families added an egg to hold it together. Take each cabbage leaf, put a spoonful of filling in the center, and roll it up tight. Tuck in the ends like a present. Layer the rolls in a pot with tomato sauce and a little water. Simmer them covered for an hour. The cabbage got tender while the filling stayed moist. The whole pot smelled like Sunday at Grandma's house. Each roll was a perfect little package. The cabbage was mild and sweet. The meat and rice filling was savory and satisfying. Kids thought they were getting individual meals made just for them. One mom said it was European cooking on an American budget. The tomato sauce tied everything together. Today, restaurants serve heritage vegetable parcels for $16, but this fed 8 people for under $2. Scalloped potatoes with ham. Ever layered comfort food like a casserole cake? It's 1966, and potatoes are 10 pounds for 50 cents. Ham pieces are what's left from the weekend roast. This recipe made both sing together in creamy harmony. You'd slice potatoes thin as paper and layer them in a buttered dish. Between each layer went bits of ham, salt, pepper, and a sprinkle of flour. Some moms added sliced onions for flavor. The top layer was all potatoes, arranged like overlapping coins. Then came the magic. Hot milk poured down the sides until it almost covered everything. Into the oven it went for over an hour. The top turned golden brown, while the inside bubbled like a promise. The milk thickened into cream while the potatoes got tender. Each forkful had smoky ham, creamy potato, and crispy edges. The ham flavor ran through every layer. Kids who claimed they didn't like potatoes somehow cleaned their plates. One working dad called it poor man's gratin, and it was just as good. The smell filled the whole house with comfort. Served with green beans or corn, it was a complete dinner. Tater tot casserole. Ever built dinner like a layered masterpiece that made kids cheer? It's 1968 in Minneapolis, and frozen tater tots just hit the grocery stores. Mom's looking at this bag of formed potato nuggets like they're space food, but she's got ground beef to stretch and a family to feed. This casserole was about to become legendary. You'd brown a pound of hamburger with diced onions until the kitchen smelled like Saturday morning at the diner. Spread that in the bottom of a greased casserole dish. Over that went a can of green beans, drained and scattered like confetti. Some families used corn or mixed vegetables instead. Then came the real magic. Cream of mushroom soup mixed with a little milk, poured over everything like gravy. The final layer was tater tots, lined up like golden soldiers ready for battle. Into the oven for 35 minutes. The house filled with the smell of browning potatoes and bubbling meat. When it came out, the tots were crispy on top, and the underneath was creamy comfort. Each bite had crunchy potato, savory meat, vegetables, and that golden mushroom sauce tying it all together. Kids went absolutely wild for this dinner. The tots made it feel like a treat instead of just another casserole. Spam and pineapple fried rice. Ever made Hawaiian comfort food in an Iowa kitchen? It's 1965, and Mom just discovered that leftover rice doesn't have to be boring. There's a can of Spam in the pantry and pineapple chunks in the fridge. This skillet dinner was about to transport the family to the tropics without leaving the kitchen table. You'd dice the Spam into small cubes and fry them until golden brown and slightly crispy at the edges. The kitchen filled with that distinctive salty, smoky smell that made kids come running. Push the Spam to one side of the skillet and scramble a couple eggs in the empty space. When they were just set, you'd add cold leftover rice, breaking up any clumps with your spatula. The rice sizzled and heated through, absorbing all those flavors from the pan. Then came the surprise. Chunks of pineapple, sweet and tangy, mixed right in with everything else. Some families added soy sauce if they had it, others just salt and pepper. The final touch was chopped green onions scattered on top for color and a little bite. Each forkful was an adventure. Salty Spam, sweet pineapple, fluffy rice, and creamy scrambled egg all in one bite. The contrast of flavors somehow worked perfectly together. Kids who usually picked at their dinner devoured this like it was takeout from a fancy restaurant. Mrs. Henderson from down the block used to say, "It tastes like vacation food but costs like everyday dinner." Braunschweiger and egg sandwiches. Ever made a fancy European breakfast from lunch meat and eggs? It's 1963 and Dad's getting ready for his factory shift. There's Braunschweiger in the icebox, that smooth liver sausage that kids either loved or refused to look at. But Mom knew how to make it irresistible. She'd slice the Braunschweiger thick and fry it in a hot skillet until it was warm and slightly crispy on the outside. The smell was rich and meaty, like a German deli. While that cooked, she'd fry eggs in the same pan, letting them soak up all those savory flavors. The eggs came out golden and perfect, with edges that were just crispy enough, on thick slices of rye bread, or white if that's what you had. She'd spread mustard and layer the warm Braunschweiger and fried eggs. Some families added sliced onions or pickles for crunch. The sandwich was substantial enough to power Dad through his morning shift and rich enough to feel like a special meal. The smooth liver sausage paired perfectly with the runny egg yolk, creating a combination that was both familiar and exotic. Franks and Beans Skillet. Ever made a backyard barbecue taste happen on a Tuesday night stovetop? It's 1964, and the kids are asking for hot dogs, but the grill's put away for winter. Mom opens a can of baked beans and grabs a package of frankfurters from the fridge. This skillet dinner was about to make everyone think it was summer camp. You'd slice the frankfurters into thick rounds and brown them in a hot skillet until they were golden and slightly charred. The kitchen started smelling like county fair food. The beans went right into the same pan. Molasses, brown sugar, and all that sweet sauce coating the hot dog pieces. Some moms added diced onions or green peppers for extra flavor and crunch. A splash of ketchup or mustard went in too, depending on what the family liked. The whole skillet bubbled away, the bean sauce getting thicker and the frankfurter slices absorbing all those sweet and tangy flavors. Served over rice or with thick slices of buttered bread, it was like having a cookout indoors. The combination of smoky frankfurters and sweet beans hit all the comfort food notes perfectly. Kids thought it was a treat because it tasted like picnic food. Parents loved it because one package of hot dogs and one can of beans fed the whole family for under $1. Mrs. Kowalski down the street used to joke, "It's camping food for people who never leave the kitchen." The whole meal took 15 minutes from start to finish, perfect for busy weeknight dinners. Even picky eaters who normally dissected their food somehow cleaned their plates when this appeared. Today, gastropubs serve artisan sausage and legume medley for $14, but this was the original working-class comfort food. Simple, satisfying, and guaranteed to make everyone happy. But just when you think hot dogs have reached their peak, wait until you see what they did with macaroni and cheese in the next incredible creation. Beef stroganoff with egg noodles. Ever made Russian aristocrat food on an American factory worker's budget? It's 1967, and Mom's flipping through a women's magazine at the beauty shop. There's a recipe for something called beef stroganoff that looks fancy enough for company but simple enough for Tuesday. She tears out the page and heads to the grocery store with determination and $2. You'd cut cheaper cuts of beef into thin strips. Nothing fancy, just what was on sale. Brown them quickly in a hot skillet with sliced mushrooms and onions. The beef didn't need to be tender yet. Just seared. Then came the magic ingredient that made Russian food American. A can of cream of mushroom. Soup mixed with sour cream. Pour that over the beef. and let it all simmer together until the meat was fork tender and the sauce was rich and creamy. The whole kitchen smelled like a fancy restaurant downtown. Meanwhile, egg noodles boiled until perfect, not too soft, not too firm. When everything came together on the plate, it looked like something from a magazine. The beef was tender enough to cut with a fork. The mushrooms added earthy flavor, and that creamy sauce tied everything together beautifully. Kids who usually complained about dinner suddenly got quiet and ate everything on their plates. Mr. Peterson next door used to peek over the fence when this was cooking and hint for an invitation. The dish cost under $3, but looked and tasted like five-star dining. One working mom wrote to her sister, "I made fancy food tonight and nobody knew it started with soup from a can." Today, restaurants charge $22 for classic stroganoff, but this version fed 6 people and made them feel sophisticated. It proved that with the right technique, even humble ingredients could taste elegant. But hold on tight, because next comes a casserole that made everybody think Mom was Italian. American goulash. Ever made a dish that sounded foreign but tasted like home? It's 1965, and Mom's trying to stretch 1 pound of hamburger into dinner for 6. She calls it American goulash, even though it has nothing to do with Hungary. This skillet dinner was pure Midwest comfort disguised as worldly cuisine. You'd brown ground beef with diced onions until the kitchen smelled like Saturday morning. Add a can of tomato sauce, some tomato paste if you had it, and whatever spices were in the cupboard. Salt, pepper, paprika, if you wanted to be authentic. Let that simmer while you cooked elbow macaroni in a separate pot. The beef mixture bubbled away, getting richer and more flavorful by the minute. When the macaroni was done, drain it and dump it right into the skillet with the meat. Stir it all together and let it cook a few more minutes so the flavors could get acquainted. Some families added corn or green peppers. Others threw in a handful of shredded cheese right at the end. The final result was a one-pot wonder that looked like something from an Italian restaurant but tasted like American comfort food. Each bite had tender pasta, savory beef, and that rich tomato sauce coating everything perfectly. Kids loved it because it was basically fancy hamburger helper. Parents loved it because it was cheap, filling, and made enough for leftovers. Mrs. Murphy from across the street used to say, "It's got a fancy name, but it's just good eating." The whole pot cost under $2 but fed everyone twice. Creamed chipped beef on toast. Ever made military food taste like Sunday brunch? It's 1962. And Dad's telling stories about his Army days while Mom opens a jar of dried beef. The kids wrinkle their noses until they smell what's coming out of that skillet. This breakfast for dinner dish turned SOS into family comfort food. You'd tear the dried beef into bite-sized pieces and rinse it under cold water to remove some of the salt. That stuff was salty enough to cure leather. In a heavy skillet, melt butter and stir in flour to make a roux. Cook it just until it smelled nutty but didn't brown. Slowly add milk, whisking constantly to avoid lumps. The sauce thickened into something rich and creamy. Add the dried beef and let it simmer until heated through. A pinch of black pepper was all it needed. The beef provided plenty of salt. Toast thick slices of bread until golden brown and pile the creamed beef on top. The combination was magic. Salty, savory beef in rich white sauce over crispy toast. Each bite was comfort food perfection. The sauce soaked into the toast just enough while still maintaining some crunch. Kids who balked at the strange-looking beef were won over by that creamy sauce. One working dad used to joke, "It's fancy enough for officers, but cheap enough for privates." The whole meal cost under $1, but felt substantial enough for dinner. Mrs. Anderson down the block served it every Friday with scrambled eggs on the side, calling it breakfast night. Today, brunch places serve heritage chipped beef for $13, but this was the original comfort food that fed families when paychecks were small and appetites were big. It proved that military food could have a civilian heart when made with love instead of duty. But get ready, because next comes a dish that made fish sticks feel gourmet: fish stick casserole. Ever turned frozen fish sticks into a dinner that made everyone think you cooked all day? It's 1969, and the freezer section just changed the game. Those rectangular breaded fish portions looked convenient but boring until Mom figured out how to make them shine. This casserole was about to make fish sticks respectable. You'd arrange frozen fish sticks in a single layer in a buttered casserole dish, no thawing required. Over them went a mixture of cream of celery soup, thinned with a little milk, creating a blanket of creamy sauce. Some moms added frozen mixed vegetables for color and nutrition. Others threw in some shredded cheese for extra richness. The top layer was crucial, either crushed crackers mixed with butter or breadcrumbs that would brown beautifully in the oven. The whole dish baked for about 30 minutes until the fish was heated through and the top was golden brown. What came out was something that looked like it took hours, but used mostly ingredients from boxes and cans. The fish sticks stayed crispy on the outside but flaky inside, while that cream sauce kept everything moist and flavorful. Kids who usually had to be bribed to eat fish suddenly cleaned their plates without complaining. The vegetables added nutrition that parents felt good about. Mr. Thompson, next door, used to lean over the fence when this was baking and comment, "Smells like a seafood restaurant over there." The whole casserole fed 6 people for under $2, making it budget-friendly enough for regular rotation. One working mom wrote in her church newsletter, "Sometimes convenience foods need a little love to reach their potential." King Ranch chicken casserole. Ever made Tex-Mex comfort food before anyone knew what Tex-Mex was? It's 1966, and Mom just heard about this recipe from her friend in Texas. It sounds exotic with a name like King Ranch, but uses ingredients from any American grocery store. This casserole was about to bring Southwest flavor to Midwest kitchens everywhere. You'd start by boiling a whole chicken until it fell apart, then shred all that tender meat. Save the broth, you'll need it. In a skillet, saute diced onions and bell peppers until soft and fragrant. Mix the chicken with cream of mushroom soup, cream of chicken soup, diced tomatoes, and just enough chicken broth to make it creamy but not soupy. The secret ingredient was chili powder, just enough to give it a little kick without scaring the kids. Layer corn tortillas in the bottom of a buttered casserole dish, then spread half the chicken mixture over them. More tortillas, more chicken, and finally a generous layer of shredded cheese on top. Into the oven it went until bubbly and golden. The smell was incredible, like a Mexican restaurant moved into your kitchen. Each bite had tender chicken, soft tortillas that had absorbed all those flavors, and melted cheese binding everything together. The mild heat from the chili powder made it interesting without being overwhelming. Kids who had never tasted Mexican food suddenly understood what all the fuss was about. Green bean, casserole. Ever made Thanksgiving happen on a Wednesday in March? It's 1963, and the Campbell Soup Company just printed a recipe on their cream of mushroom soup labels. Mom's looking at this combination of ingredients like it might be crazy enough to work. Green beans, mushroom soup, and fried onions from a can. It shouldn't be good, but somehow it absolutely was. You'd start with frozen or canned green beans, drained and spread in a buttered casserole dish. The cream of mushroom soup got mixed with a little milk to thin it out, then poured over the beans like a blanket. Some families added slivered almonds for crunch. Others threw in some shredded cheese. But the real magic was on top. Those French fried onions from a can, scattered generously over everything. Into the oven for 25 minutes until bubbly and golden. What came out was comfort food perfection. The green beans stayed just tender enough, the mushroom sauce was rich and creamy, And those fried onions added the perfect crispy contrast. It tasted like holiday food, but took 15 minutes to assemble. Kids who normally pushed vegetables around their plates actually asked for seconds. The combination of textures, soft beans, creamy sauce, crunchy onions, made every bite interesting. Mrs. Patterson from the church auxiliary started bringing this to every potluck, and soon everyone was asking for the recipe. Ambrosia salad. Ever served dessert disguised as salad and watched everyone pretend it was healthy? It's 1964 in Birmingham, Alabama, and the church potluck table is groaning under the weight of covered dishes. Right in the middle sits Mrs. Caldwell's famous Ambrosia salad, gleaming like jewelry in a crystal bowl. This wasn't salad in any traditional sense. It was pure Southern comfort masquerading as something virtuous. You'd start with canned mandarin oranges, drained, but saving just a little of that sweet syrup. Add chunks of fresh pineapple if you could afford it, canned if you couldn't. Seedless grapes got halved and tossed in for color and pop. Then came the magic ingredients that made it salad: shredded coconut, chopped pecans, and miniature marshmallows. The whole thing got folded together with sour cream or whipped cream, depending on what was in the refrigerator. Some families added maraschino cherries for extra color and sweetness. The finished product was a cloud of white and gold that jiggled slightly when you scooped it. Each bite was a surprise: sweet oranges, tangy pineapple, crunchy nuts, chewy coconut, and those soft marshmallows that melted on your tongue. Kids thought they were getting away with something eating salad that tasted like candy. Adults knew better, but went along with the charade because it was absolutely delicious. Mrs. Caldwell used to laugh and say, "The Lord works in mysterious ways, especially when it comes to getting children to eat fruit." The whole bowl cost under $2, but fed 20 people at least. Everyone wanted the recipe, but half the charm was watching people's faces when they took that first bite expecting lettuce and getting paradise instead. Today, trendy cafes serve heritage fruit medley for $8 a cup, but this was the original that taught Southern cooks how to make fruit feel fancy. It proved that sometimes the best comfort comes from not taking food too seriously. But wait until you see what happened when JellO met cottage cheese in a combination that defied all logic. Lime JellO with cottage cheese. Ever mixed something savory into something sweet and created pure magic? It's 1965 in Phoenix, Arizona, and the temperature outside is already hitting 90 degrees by noon. Mom's looking for something cool, refreshing, and filling that won't heat up the kitchen. This molded salad was about to become the talk of the neighborhood bridge club. You'd dissolve lime JellO in boiling water until it was crystal clear and bright green as a traffic light. Let it cool slightly, then fold in cottage cheese. The small curd kind worked best. Some adventurous cooks added crushed pineapple or chopped walnuts for texture. The mixture went into a ring mold or individual cups and chilled until firm as a handshake. What emerged was something that shouldn't have worked, but absolutely did. The lime flavor was tart and refreshing, while the cottage cheese added protein and a creamy texture that made each bite satisfying. It was cold enough to cool you down, but substantial enough to call it lunch. The bright green color made it look festive and fun, like eating sunshine mixed with spring. Kids were initially suspicious of anything green that wasn't candy, but one taste converted them completely. Mrs. Henderson served it at her daughter's bridal shower in 1967, and 3 people asked for the recipe before dessert was even served. She used to joke, "It's healthy food that doesn't know it's healthy." The whole mold cost under 75 cents. But looked elegant enough for company. Some families made it with different JellO flavors: orange with cottage cheese and mandarin oranges, or cherry with cream cheese instead. Each variation was a little adventure in flavor and color. Today, wellness cafes serve probiotic gelatin parfaits for $11, but this was the original that proved healthy could be delicious when you stopped trying so hard. It was cooling, satisfying, and just weird enough to be memorable. memorable. But hold on to your hat, because next comes a dish that put pineapple where it absolutely didn't belong. Pineapple upside-down ham. Ever flipped dinner upside down and made it look like dessert? It's 1968, and Mom's staring at a canned ham that needs to feed 8 people for Sunday dinner. She remembers seeing something in a magazine about pineapple upside-down cake and gets a wild idea. This recipe was about to turn a simple ham into the centerpiece that made everyone do a double take. You'd start by scoring the ham in a diamond pattern, just deep enough to let the flavors penetrate. In the bottom of a roasting pan, arrange pineapple rings in a single layer with a maraschino cherry nestled in the center of each ring. Some cooks added brown sugar between the rings for extra caramelization. The ham went on top, cut side down, nestling into those pineapple rings like it was meant to be there. A glaze made from the pineapple juice, brown sugar, and a touch of mustard got brushed over the whole thing. Into the oven it went, basting every 30 minutes with more glaze and the pan juices. As it cooked, the pineapple caramelized and the ham absorbed all those sweet, tangy flavors. When it was done, you'd carefully flip the whole thing onto a serving platter. What emerged looked like a work of art. Golden pineapple rings arranged perfectly across the top of a glossy, mahogany-colored ham. The smell was incredible, like a luau happened in your oven. Each slice revealed that beautiful pineapple pattern, and the flavor was the perfect balance of salty ham and sweet fruit. The pineapple juice had penetrated the meat, making it incredibly tender and flavorful. Mr. Sullivan next door used to peek over the fence when this was cooking and hint heavily for an invitation to dinner. Kids who usually picked at their meat suddenly cleaned their plates without being asked. The whole ham cost under $5, but looked like something from a fancy hotel restaurant. One working mom wrote to her sister, "I made art today, and then we ate it." Today, upscale dining establishments serve glazed heritage ham with tropical garnish for $35. But this was the original that proved presentation could transform even the most humble ingredients into something spectacular. But just when you think fruit and meat have reached their peak partnership, wait until you see what happened when cranberries met meatballs. Sweet and sour meatballs. Ever made Chinese restaurant food in an American kitchen using ingredients from the pantry? It's 1967, and everyone's talking about this new thing called ethnic food. Mom's flipping through a magazine and finds a recipe that promises to bring Far East flavors to the Midwest dinner table. This dish was about to make ground beef taste like it traveled around the world. You'd mix ground beef with breadcrumbs, egg, minced onion, salt, and pepper. Basic meatball territory. Roll them into walnut-sized balls and brown them in a hot skillet until they were crusty on all sides. The real magic happened with the sauce. In a saucepan, you'd combine grape jelly, yes, grape jelly, with chili sauce, soy sauce if you had it, and a splash of vinegar. Heat it until the jelly melted and everything blended into a glossy, sweet, tangy sauce that looked like liquid candy. Drop those browned meatballs right into the sauce and let them simmer until they were cooked through and completely coated. The kitchen filled with an aroma that was part barbecue, part candy store, and completely irresistible. Served over white rice, each meatball was a perfect balance of savory meat and that incredible sweet-sour glaze. The sauce clung to every surface, making each bite burst with flavor. Kids who normally dissected their food to avoid anything unfamiliar somehow devoured these without question. The combination shouldn't have worked. Grape jelly on meat seemed crazy, but it absolutely did. Mrs. Chen, who had just moved from San Francisco, tasted them at a potluck and declared them not authentic, but not bad either, which was considered high praise. The whole dish cost under $2, but made everyone feel worldly and sophisticated. One working dad used to joke, "It's like going to Hong Kong without leaving Ohio." Today, Asian fusion restaurants serve similar dishes for $18. But this was the original that introduced American families to the concept that sweet and savory could dance together beautifully. It proved that innovation often comes comes from taking chances with whatever ingredients you have on hand. But prepare yourself, because next comes a casserole that made tuna fish feel fancy. Tuna rice casserole. Ever transformed canned fish into something that looked like it came from a fancy kitchen? It's 1964, and Mom's staring at 3 cans of tuna and wondering how to make them stretch into dinner for 6. She's got leftover rice from yesterday and a dream of creating something that would make the family forget they were eating from cans. This casserole was about to prove that humble ingredients could have elegant aspirations. You'd flake the tuna carefully, removing any bits that looked suspicious. Nobody wanted to bite down on something unexpected. Mix it with cooked rice, a can of cream of celery soup thinned with a little milk, and whatever vegetables were hiding in the freezer. Peas worked perfectly, but corn or green beans would do. Some adventurous cooks added chopped hard-boiled eggs or a handful of shredded cheese. The mixture went into a buttered casserole dish and got topped with crushed potato chips or buttered breadcrumbs for that all-important crunch factor. Into the oven for 30 minutes until bubbly and golden on top. What emerged was comfort food that had clearly put on its Sunday best. The tuna had absorbed all the creamy, savory flavors, while the rice provided substance and the vegetables added color and nutrition. That crispy topping was the perfect textural contrast to the creamy interior. Each forkful was satisfying in a way that made you forget this started with ingredients from the pantry shelf. Kids who usually wrinkled their noses at fish night somehow cleaned their plates without complaint. The combination of familiar flavors made the tuna feel less like canned fish and more like a proper dinner entree. Mrs. Kowalski from down the street used to say, "It's like tuna salad went to finishing school." The whole casserole cost under $1.50, but fed everyone generously with leftovers for tomorrow's lunch. One working mom wrote in her diary, "Made something from nothing today, and everyone acted like it was something special." Today, bistros serve seafood grain medley for $15, but this was the original that taught Depression-era cooks how to make canned goods feel gourmet. It proved that with the right technique and a little creativity, even the most basic ingredients could become memorable family meals. But hold on tight, because next comes a dish that made chicken livers taste like fine dining. Chicken livers and onions? Ever made organ meat taste like it belonged in a fancy restaurant? It's 1963, and chicken livers cost 30 cents a pound, while chicken breast costs 90 cents. Mom knows which one fits the budget, but she also knows the secret to making cheap taste expensive. This skillet dinner was about to turn the most overlooked part of the chicken into something the whole family would request. You'd soak the chicken livers in milk for an hour to draw out any strong flavors. This was the secret that separated good cooks from great ones. Pat them dry and dust them lightly with seasoned flour. Meanwhile, slice onions thick and cook them slowly in butter until they were golden brown and sweet as candy. The smell alone was enough to make neighbors knock on the door, asking what was cooking. Push the onions to one side of the skillet and add the floured livers. Cook them fast and hot until they were browned on the outside, but still slightly pink inside. Overcooking would turn them into shoe leather. The livers and onions danced together in that butter, creating a gravy that was rich enough to make you forget these weren't expensive cuts of meat. Served over rice or mashed potatoes with the pan gravy spooned over everything. It was a meal that satisfied on every level. The livers were tender and mild, nothing like the strong organ meat people feared. Those sweet caramelized onions balanced everything perfectly. Kids who swore they hated liver somehow managed to clean their plates when it was prepared this way. Mr. Peterson next door, who grew up on a farm, used to nod approvingly and say, "Now that's how you cook organs proper." The whole meal cost under $1, but provided more iron and protein than a steak dinner. One working mom wrote to her mother, "Finally figured out how to make the cheap cuts taste like the expensive ones." Today, upscale restaurants Serve pan-seared organ meats with caramelized alliums for $22, but this was the original that taught American families to appreciate every part of the animal. It proved that good technique could transform even the most challenging ingredients into comfort food gold, and that sometimes the most nutritious foods were also the most affordable. But get ready, because next comes a soup that made vegetables taste like a complete meal. Vegetable beef soup. Ever made a soup so hearty it could stand up and introduce itself? It's 1965, and there's a soup bone from yesterday's roast beef sitting in the refrigerator, still clinging to enough meat to matter. Mom looks at that bone and sees tomorrow's dinner hiding in plain sight. This soup was about to transform scraps into something that would make the whole house smell like Sunday afternoon. You'd put that bone in the biggest pot you owned, cover it with water, and let it simmer for hours until the kitchen windows fogged up with steam. The marrow slowly leaked out, creating a broth rich enough to coat a spoon. Meanwhile, you'd chop every vegetable in the house: carrots, celery, onions, potatoes, green beans, corn if you had it. Some families added tomatoes or cabbage. Others threw in whatever was getting soft in the crisper drawer. After a few hours, you'd fish out the bone, pick off any remaining meat, and add it back to the pot along with all those chopped vegetables. Season it with salt, pepper, and maybe a bay leaf if you were feeling fancy. Let it simmer until the vegetables were tender and the flavors had married into something greater than the sum of their parts. What emerged was a soup that was more like a stew, thick with vegetables and chunks of beef, rich with that bone-deep flavor that you can't get from a can. Each bowl was different depending on what vegetables made it into the pot, but every spoonful was satisfying in a way that made you understand why people called it comfort food. Kids who normally picked vegetables out of everything somehow ate them willingly when they were swimming in that rich broth. The soup got better each day as the flavors deepened and concentrated. Mrs. Murphy used to make a huge pot on Sunday and serve it all week, adding different vegetables or seasonings to keep it interesting. One working dad used to joke, "It's like eating the whole garden in one bowl." The cost was minimal, mostly the price of vegetables and whatever meat clung to that bone, but it fed the family for days. Today, artisan soup shops sell rustic vegetable medley with grass-fed beef for $12 a bowl, but this was the original that taught families how to waste nothing and want nothing more. But hold your breath, because next comes a dish that made fish cakes feel like they came from a seaside restaurant. Salmon cakes with white sauce. Ever made the ocean come to Ohio using nothing but canned fish and kitchen magic? It's 1966 and fresh seafood costs more than most. Families can justify, but there's something about salmon cakes that makes even landlocked dinners feel coastal. Mom opens a can of salmon, and suddenly the kitchen smells like possibility mixed with the promise of something special. You'd drain the salmon and pick through it carefully, removing any bones that looked too ambitious. Mix it with mashed potatoes. Leftover ones worked perfectly, along with a beaten egg, chopped onion, and enough breadcrumbs to hold everything together. Some cooks added a touch of lemon juice if they had it, or a pinch of Old Bay seasoning if they were feeling worldly. Form the mixture into patties and fry them in hot oil until they were golden brown and crispy on the outside. The smell was incredible, like a fish fry happening right in your own kitchen. While the cakes cooked, you'd make a simple white sauce in another pan. Butter, flour, milk, and seasoning whisked together until smooth and creamy. The finished salmon cakes were crispy outside and flaky inside, with that distinctive salmon flavor that made everyone think of fancy restaurants and seaside vacations, served with the white sauce drizzled over the top, and maybe some lemon wedges if you had them. It was a meal that felt far more expensive than it actually was. The contrast between the crispy exterior and the tender, flaky interior made each bite interesting. Kids who usually turned their noses up at fish somehow loved these, especially when they were served with French fries or mashed potatoes. Mrs. Henderson used to serve them every Friday during Lent, and her Protestant neighbors would suddenly develop an interest in Catholic traditions. The whole meal cost under $2, but felt like dining out at a fish house by the water. One working mom wrote to her sister, "Made fancy food tonight using ingredients from the pantry shelf." Today, seafood restaurants charge $18 for similar cakes, but this version proved that with the right technique, canned salmon could taste just as good as fresh. It taught families that you didn't need to live near the ocean to enjoy the fruits of the sea, and that sometimes the most satisfying meals come from making the most of what you have. But prepare yourself, because next comes a casserole that put macaroni and tomatoes together in a way that made everyone think Mom was Italian. Macaroni and tomato casserole. Ever made Italian comfort food using ingredients that never saw Italy? It's 1964 and Mom's looking at a box of elbow macaroni and a can of tomatoes like they might hold the secret to feeding 6 people on $2. She's heard about this thing called Italian food that's supposed to be exotic and delicious, but she's going to make it American and affordable. This casserole was about to prove that good food doesn't need a passport. You'd cook the macaroni until it was just tender, then drain it and set it aside. In the same pot, you'd brown some ground beef with diced onions until the kitchen smelled like possibility. Add a can of tomatoes, crushed or whole, whatever was on sale, along with tomato sauce and whatever Italian seasonings were hiding in the spice cabinet. Oregano was essential, basil if you had it, and a little garlic powder for sophistication. Let that simmer until it thickened into something that looked like real sauce. Mix the cooked macaroni back in, add some shredded cheese, mozzarella if you could find it, American if you couldn't, and dump everything into a buttered casserole dish. More cheese went on top because cheese makes everything better. Into the oven until bubbly and golden, filling the whole house with aromas that made neighbors slow down when they walked past. What emerged was comfort food that had clearly been taking Italian lessons. The pasta was tender, the meat sauce was rich and herby, and that melted cheese tied everything together in a way that made sense to American palates. Each forkful was satisfying and familiar while still feeling like something new and exciting. Kids who had never heard of Italy somehow knew this was good food. The combination of pasta, meat, tomatoes, and cheese hit all the comfort food notes perfectly. Mrs. Rossi, who actually was Italian, tasted it at a church potluck and declared it not traditional but not terrible, which was considered high praise from someone who knew the real thing. The whole casserole cost under $3 but fed 8 people generously. One working mom wrote in her recipe box, "This is what happens when America meets Italy and they become friends." The beauty of this dish was its flexibility. Some families added green peppers or mushrooms when they had them. Others mixed in leftover vegetables from Sunday dinner. During tomato season, fresh tomatoes replaced the canned ones, making the whole kitchen smell like a garden. Mrs. Patterson down the street always added a secret ingredient, a tablespoon of sugar to balance the acidity of the tomatoes. "Makes it taste like it simmered all day," she'd wink. The leftovers were almost better than the original, the flavors deepening overnight in the refrigerator. Kids would eat cold spoonfuls straight from the casserole dish the next morning before school. Some ambitious moms would make double batches, one for dinner and one to freeze for next week's emergency meal. The frozen version needed an extra 15 minutes in the oven, but came out just as bubbly and delicious. This casserole represented the American dream in food form, taking something foreign and making it familiar, accessible, and absolutely delicious. It was the gateway dish that introduced countless families to the idea that Italian food didn't have to be intimidating or expensive. Today, Italian-American restaurants serve similar dishes for $14, but this was the original fusion food that taught Middle American families that foreign could still feel like home. But hold on, because the final dish is about to prove that sometimes the simplest ingredients create the most unforgettable memories. Fried potatoes and onions. Ever made magic happen with just 2 ingredients and a cast-iron skillet? It's 1969 and it's the end of the month before payday. The pantry's looking pretty bare, but there's a bag of potatoes and an onion sitting on the counter like old friends waiting to be invited to the party. This dish was about to prove that sometimes the most memorable meals come from the simplest combinations. You'd slice the potatoes thin as paper money. Some folks peeled them, others left the skins on for extra nutrition and flavor. The onions got sliced thick into half-moons that would caramelize beautifully in the hot fat. Heat up that trusty cast-iron skillet with enough oil or bacon grease to coat the bottom generously. The potatoes went in first, arranged in a single layer so they could get properly crispy. The sizzle was music, and the smell was pure comfort. After they browned on one side, you'd flip them carefully and add the onions to the empty spaces in the pan. Season everything with salt and pepper, then let time and heat work their magic. The potatoes turned golden brown and crispy on the edges while staying creamy inside. The onions softened and caramelized until they were sweet enough to eat like candy. Stirring them together created a dish that was somehow greater than the sum of its parts. The sweet onions balanced the earthy potatoes, and that cast iron gave everything a flavor you couldn't get from any other pan. Served alongside whatever protein was available, eggs, leftover meat, or just by themselves with thick slices of buttered bread, they made a complete meal that satisfied on every level. Kids would fight over the crispy bits, and adults would quietly go back for seconds and thirds. Mr. Johnson used to say this dish tasted like my grandmother's love, and somehow everyone knew exactly what he meant. The whole skillet cost less than 50 cents, but created memories that lasted decades. The secret was in the timing and the heat. Too hot and the potatoes burned before they cooked through, too cool and they turned into mush without any of that beautiful golden crust. Experienced cooks knew to resist the urge to stir too often, letting each side develop that perfect caramelization that made all the difference. Some families had variations passed down through generations. Dad's side always added bell peppers, while Mom's people swore by a pinch of paprika right at the end. During harvest season, when potatoes were dirt cheap, this dish appeared on tables 3 or 4 times a week, and nobody complained. Winter mornings often started with leftover fried potatoes reheated in the same skillet with a couple of eggs cracked right on top. The combination of crispy potatoes, runny egg yolk, and sweet caramelized onions was breakfast perfection that required no fancy ingredients or complicated techniques. Mrs. Murphy used to joke that she judged potential daughters-in-law by how well they could fry potatoes and onions. If she can't master the basics, what's she gonna do when life gets complicated? The dish was democratic in the best way. Rich families and poor families, city dwellers and country folks, everyone had their version of fried potatoes and onions. It transcended regional differences and economic circumstances because it spoke to something fundamental about American cooking, the ability to take humble ingredients and transform them through patience, technique, and love into something that nourished both body and soul. Today, upscale restaurants serve artisan root vegetables with caramelized alliums for $16. But this was the original that taught American families that good food doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. It just has to be made with care, served with love, and shared with people who matter. This simple dish represented everything beautiful about working-class cooking, taking humble ingredients and transforming them through technique, patience, and heart into something that nourished both body and soul. These 30 dinners fed America when times were tough, proving love tastes better than money ever could. From tuna noodle casserole to fried potatoes and onions, each dish tells a story of families making do with what they had and somehow creating magic in the process. These weren't just recipes. They were survival guides written in flour and hope, passed down from mothers who knew that feeding your family well didn't require a big budget, just a big heart. Maybe we've gotten too fancy for our own good. Maybe we've forgotten that the best meals don't always come from the most expensive ingredients, but from the most loving hands. These working-class dinners remind us that comfort doesn't need a credit card, and that sometimes the simplest combinations create the most lasting memories. So here's to every mom who stretched $1 until it screamed, every dad who smiled when dinner was ready no matter what was on the plate, and every family who gathered around a table knowing that love was the secret ingredient that made everything taste better. These dishes may be from the past, but their lessons are timeless. Good food, like good love, comes from the heart, not the wallet. The next time you're looking at a pantry that seems half empty, remember these 30 dinners. Remember that American families built memories and filled bellies with nothing more than creativity, determination, and the belief that everyone deserves to sit down to something good at the end of a long day. That's not just cooking. That's love served one plate at a time, one plate at a time, one plate at a time.